When describing scents, along with our actual five senses, sight, smell, taste, touch, and hearing, I'd also like to give you a few comparative words. These include simile, metaphor, allusion, and personification. Now, simile you've most likely come across before. This is any time you compare two objects using the words like or as. So, her smile was like the radiant dawn. He was as strong as an ox and twice as smart. The storm came raging in like a terrible sea monster bent on destruction. All of that like or as puts them together and makes us compare how they seem to us. The next one is metaphor. Metaphor also does a comparison, but for this one, it actually juxtaposes the two identities and says one is the other. So, we see the spring was a fountain of flowers and birds. Was there actually a fountain of flowers and birds? Probably not, but we see the image. The desert was a burning oven of pain and misery. Is there actually a gigantic oven out there? No, but by comparing them, we understand that. Metaphor takes the comparison a step further than simile. You might understand that, and if you Texans, instead of saying it's hot as hell, at certain points, metaphorically, you just say it's hell. Moving on, when we get to allusion, this one does take a little bit of cultural knowledge on your audience's behalf, but the payoff is worth it. An allusion is any time you use one word or phrase to reference another known artist or their work. So that might be something along the lines of, the boss strode into the office with Godzilla-like rage. If you know who Godzilla is, then you can just imagine the scene unfolding before. Or it could be something like, with Ahab-like determination, Susan sped down the highway in her own white whale hunt for the last bag of Milano cookies. Right, a couple of them there. If you know Ahab and his hunt for the white whale from Moby Dick, then you suddenly understand poor Sue and her futile hunt for cookies. All that good stuff. Allusion can be very handy, throwing in pop cultural references. Hint, hint, plenty of modern artists enjoy using this as they reference other artists out there, either to praise them or diss them, and of course there's plenty of social and political commentary, allusions, that also end up in modern work. Our last one is personification. Personification is lots of fun because it gives human qualities to animal or inanimate objects. It's anthropomorphization, there's a fun one, at its finest. So, words like, the little dog laughed to see such a sight, and the dish ran away with the spoon. Personification. Dogs can't actually laugh. Dishes and spoons, well, hopefully they stay in their cupboard. So the next time you say something like, my car grumbled and growled before it choked and died, it's personification. The sky glowered at me from above, personification. My computer flipped me the blue screen of death before signing off, well, it did that. But whole, flipping off sign, still personification. Each of those things doesn't have a face or specific vocal cords or even hands, thank goodness, in order to demonstrate all of those people-like actions. Alright, so now that we have a way to pull in sound with melody and rhythm, we have structure, our key signature of writing lyrics and poetry, to begin to help form it, and finally, a little bit of sense to take that big old experience or emotion and condense it into just a few lines. What do we end up with? Well, it depends on the genre you're writing in. Many times when people say, oh, I would love to write music, the follow-up question should be, okay, what kind? I mean, are you planning to write classical, blues? Are you going for something like R&B or maybe some reggae? Anyone? When we say we want to write poetry, you should be asking the same question. What kind? Because contrary to popular opinion, it is not all just one kind of poetry. So here's a few examples of the formal sort of poetry you might decide to write. We'll start off with an example of a Petrarchan sonnet. Now, just to give you some parameters, this means that we'll have 14 lines. It'll be in iambic pentameter. Remember, so ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. It will have a ABBA rhyme scheme, and then the ending is something called the sestet, where it'll have some weaving rhymes in there. And one thing I'd like to point out about reading real quickly, a lot of people, when a poem has end rhyme, read to the rhyme, which is understandable because that's where the music is loudest. So again, remember the bat, mat, cat, fat, brat, all those kind of things. But same as once you understand the music of a piece, you begin interpreting the ebbs and flows, the timing of it a little bit better. You can also read naturally to the punctuation. So I prefer the latter. I read over the rhymes to kind of subdue them a little bit more, especially in an end rhyme heavy piece, and I read more for the punctuation. So there's a little bit more of a natural sound to it and not quite as heavy end rhyme. So it sounds a little bit like this. This one is from Elizabeth Barrett Browning. How do I love thee? How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I love thee to the depth and breadth and height my soul can reach when feeling out of sight for the ends of being and ideal grace. I love thee to the level of every day's most quiet need by sun and candlelight. I love thee freely as men strive for right. I love thee purely as they turn from praise. I love thee with a passion put to use in my old griefs and with my childhood's faith. I love thee with the love I seem to lose with my lost saints. I love thee with the breath, smile, tears of all my life, and if God choose, I shall but love thee better after death. Wasn't that nice? All right. Our next example is a Shakespearean sonnet. Well, a few centuries after Petrarch penned his famous sonnets, Shakespeare came along and decided he could do him one better. So for a Shakespearean sonnet, we're still going to have 14 lines. It will still be in iambic pentameter, but Shakespeare decided to change up the rhyme scheme a little bit more. This one goes A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, and ends in something called a heroic couplet, G, G, which merely means the last two lines are perfectly rhymed iambic pentameter. So, that sounds a little like this. This is Sonnet 18, Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometimes too hot the eye of heaven shines, and oft is his gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometimes declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest. Nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. Also very nice. A nice sentiment. All right. So for those of you who really do enjoy that end rhyme, the distinctive music that comes with matching it just right, then for you I offer up the villanelle. The villanelle has a little bit more weaving to do. Not only do we have a strong rhyme throughout it, but repetition is particularly important in this. So, whereas the particular meter might change up a little bit, this one has a predominant A, we'll call it A prime line, and it's one specific line that will be repeated over and over again, alternating throughout the stanzas. Then we have a secondary Maybe we'll call it a beta line, that's still an A rhyme, you'll hear what I mean, that also gets repeated, alternating back and forth. And then we have a B rhyme, kind of sandwiched in there, almost like a Oreo cookie. And it will rhyme with itself in the middle of the poem all the way throughout. All right. So here's a villanelle, a rather famous one, by Dylan Thomas. This is Do Not Go Gentle into That Good Night. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rage at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bray, rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men, who caught and sang the sun in flight, and learned too late they grieved it on its way, do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men, near death, who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay, rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Well, there's one to read before bedtime. Obviously one with lots of power and emotion into it, and the repetition of those lines, do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light, just pounds home how fervently the poet feels for his ailing father. All right, the last one of the day, perhaps the one with the most subtle touch of all, is blank verse. For this one we have plenty of rhythm, but you'll notice the rhyme is absent. It's still considered formal, and of course this is actually one by, I would say, a master of this particular form, Robert Frost. This is Mending Wall. It's written in iambic pentameter, which means each line has at least 10 syllables, mostly iambic pentameter. There are a few places where he breaks form to have a little bit of fun, but like any master musician, he breaks the rules because he knows what they are. So here we are, Mending Wall. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that sends the frozen ground swell under it and spills the upper boulders in the sun, and makes gaps even two can pass abreast. The work of hunters is another thing. I have come after them and made repair where they have left not one stone on a stone, but they would have the rabbit out of hiding to please the yelping dogs. The gaps, I mean, no one has seen them made or heard them made, but at spring mending time we find them there. I let my neighbor know beyond the hill, and on a day we meet to walk the line, and we set the wall between us once again. We keep the wall between us as we go. To each the boulders that have fallen to each, and some are loaves and some so nearly balls we have to use a spell to make them balance. Stay where you are until our backs are turned. We wear off fingers out handling them. Oh, just another kind of outdoor game. One on a side, it comes to little more. There where it is we do not need the wall. He is all pine and I am apple orchard. My apple trees will never get across and eat the cones under his pines, I tell him. He only says, good fences make good neighbors. Spring is the mischief in me, and I wonder if I could put a notion in his head. Why do they make good neighbors? Isn't it where there are cows? But here there are no cows. Before I built a wall, I'd ask to know what I was walling in or walling out, and to whom I was like to give offence. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that wants it down. I could say elves to him, but it's not elves exactly, and I'd rather he said it for himself. I see him there, bringing a stone grasped firmly by the top in each hand, like an old stone savage armed. He moves in darkness, as it seems to me, not only of woods and the shade of trees. He will not go behind his father's saying, and he likes having thought of it so well he says it again. Good fences make good neighbors. Well, now that we've had an opportunity to actually examine some of the formal poetries, figure out what goes into a sonnet or a villanelle, hopefully they're not quite as intimidating as some people seem to think formal poetry should be. Far from being constrictive, formal poetry is just like learning to play any instrument. Yes, there is a certain learning curve as you do the basics and begin to understand a little bit more about rhythm, but that just means as you get more comfortable with it, you master the rhythm and get to use the instrument in even more powerful ways than before. Even though in our minds we may make big separation and distinctions between, the way that Beethoven wrote his music and the way that, famous blues musicians composed theirs, it's not nearly as distinct as you might think. So, that's all for this week. But make sure to stay tuned next time when we take all the rules we learned today and throw them out the window. See ya!
A cup of coffee in the morning, and I get the paper. I check the headlines and decide that I am bored. I check my email and I decide to answer later. Another cup of coffee and I drag myself to work.
Octameter.
My life is grounded in a firm routine.
Darn, I was doing so good and I second guessed myself. It is octameter.
I just stick to what I know.
Makes me mad.
I'm sitting there at work and I realized I forgot to wake up. I can't be productive when I'm
Greeks and the
dreaming about
Romans!
a
Greeks
sheep.
and the Romans!
I go upstairs and get myself another cup of coffee. I get downstairs
the
and then
beginning.
I spill it on the floor.
Or
My life is grounded in a firm routine of coffee, sleep, and work. I am not boring, I just stick to what I know.
People don't get is that it's really hard just putting yourself out there. There's a lot of emotions, there's a lot of sensitivity, and when you're just getting nothing but like negativity from people, it's just,
I best switch to
it brings you down. So you gotta fight the haters. You gotta fight the people who are
My
trying
life
to.
is grounded in a firm routine of coffee, sleep, and work. I am not boring, I just stick to what I know.
Oh, no, I don't know.